I wanted to do this today, so there's some video stuff that I'm going to try to do during intermissions of the first and second game of the day. We've got Ottawa playing Philadelphia right now. It's after the first period. So Philadelphia is on the board as one of the top 10 teams. This will not include the game they're playing right now as I'm recording this against the Ottawa Senators, which has been quite feisty at the end of the first period, I might add. So top 10 teams, most of these teams end up making the playoffs, right? And the interesting thing is I looked at the bottom 10 yesterday and all of them were either 5-5 or lower. And all of these teams have won more games than they've lost in regulation. Now, some of them have only won 5 of their last 10, but for the most part, they're still gaining ground. And this is where, if you're a team at the bottom of the league, it gets more and more difficult to catch up because you need one of these guys to get cold. Washington, 31 games, 22-4-5. They're 8-1-1 in their last 10. They've won 5 in a row. Best team in the league. They're coming off that road trip in California where no problem. We got it all done. Don't know why we didn't do it before. And they're number 3 in goals per game. So this is goals for per game. This isn't just straight goals for and goals against. I think goals per game tells you better where everybody is. Goals against per game, they're 10th. So that's not quite elite, but still it's getting better. Holtby did have a slow start. Their power play is 5th in the league. Their penalty killing is 11th. They have 6 players with 11 or more goals right now. A lot of goal scoring to go around. So while it's easy to point at Ovechkin and Karlsson and go, well, yeah, with these guys. But there are a lot of good players having good seasons right now. And so the Capitals, they are legit. 110%. Do not see them falling much further down than, say, I could see them ending up finishing second or third in the overall standings, but not much further down than that. And right now, they're the best in the league. Boston's number 2. They have 29 games played, a record of 23-6 over their last 10. They're 8-0-2. Their most recent game was an overtime loss against Chicago, and it'll be interesting to see how they do against Colorado tonight. I'll just put it that way. I know they'll make the playoffs, but I do think they've been overachieving a little bit over this last month or so. They're number 4 in goals for. They're number 1 in goals against, which makes me nervous. Every time they're number 1 in goals against, they then allow like 4 or 5 in the next couple of games. That happened early this season. It happened late last season too, where they were in the running for the Jennings, and then all of a sudden they weren't. They're number 2 on the power play. They're number 9 on the penalty kill. What really stands out with Boston, though, Marchand, 44 points. Pastrnak, 43. Bergeron, who's missed some games, 24 points for him. Krejci, 21, and Krug, 19. If you shut down Marchand and Pastrnak, you can shut down the Boston Bruins. It's a big ask. When you've got Pastrnak with 25 goals, it's a big ask to shut them down, but I think it can be done, especially in a playoff series, but they're going to make the playoffs. St. Louis played 30 games. They're 18-6-6. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. They lost their last game. That was against Pittsburgh. They're 17th in goals for, which kind of surprises me and yet kind of doesn't. There is no big superstar name on the St. Louis Blues. Not really, and I know you're going to say Ryan O'Reilly, but he's not your typical superstar, put it that way. They're number 5 in goals against. I'm surprised it's actually not better than 5th. Their power play is number 6. Their penalty kill is number 5. So they're just trucking along. They're having a very solid, not spectacular, but solid season. They had that nice winning streak where they got better as the winning streak went along. Their leading scorers, when you look at it, Perron with 28 points, O'Reilly 26, Shen 25, and Jaden Schwartz with 22. They just have a very solid lineup. They don't have that big superstar. If Perron's their number 1 scorer, it means Perron's had a very good year, and it points out this is a very difficult team to stop in a playoff series, because who do you stop? Tarasenko should be back for the playoffs, and it's easy to point at Tarasenko and say, well, he's their superstar. But if you compare his numbers to somebody like McDavid or McKinnon or Draisaitl or Eichel, or like the numbers just don't compare. So St. Louis doesn't have that superstar player, and it works to their benefit because there is no one guy to shut down. The Islanders, 27 games, 19-6-2 overall. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. They've won their last game. And they're 19th in goals for, they're third in goals against. So the narrative that the Islanders really rely on their defense and goaltending, it's still there. Their power play's 18th, their penalty kill's 12th. I'm surprised their penalty kill is only 12th in the NHL. I would have thought it would have been top 3, considering their goaltending, right? They are doing this fantastic job of rotating goaltenders, they being Barry Trotz, where every other game it's going to be Grace, every other game it's going to be Varlamov, and unless somebody gets hurt, he's going to keep it that way all season. There are 6 players on the Islanders who have 7 or more goals, but the Islanders, much like the Blues, who are you shutting down? Which player on the Islanders are you looking at and saying, all right, if we shut down Barzal, nah, Barzal hasn't put up superstar numbers. And nobody in the Islanders locker room really has. You just have a team of guys who've bought in. So again, we're looking for who might drop out of the top, out of these top 10 teams, who might have a fallback. And I don't see any of these top 4 being there. Now, the Oilers are going to be the pick for a lot of people, and we'll get into that. 31 games played, 18-10-3 record. They're 5-4-1 in their last 10. They won their last game last night against the LA Kings. But I can understand why people would look at the Oilers and say, well, they're probably going to be the ones. And I can understand that because they're number 16 in goals for, so they're middle of the pack there. They're number 13 in goals against, so they're not top 10 there either. Their power play and penalty kill, however, power play's number 1, their penalty kill's number 2. So 5-on-5, not fantastic, but power play, penalty kill, don't take penalties against these guys, and you're probably not going to score on the power play when you get your opportunities. Draisaitl has 53 points right now, McDavid has 52, and then James Neal has 20, and Cassian has 19. Clefbaum also has 19. So when people point out that Edmonton has scoring depth issues, Montreal may very well as well, but they're not in this video. Edmonton has scoring depth issues. This is why. Draisaitl and McDavid are good enough to drag this team to a playoff spot. But in the event that somebody gets hurt, or in the event that they just go through a cold streak, as most players are known to do who are human, and I'm not accusing Connor McDavid of being human, you can understand why people would say, well, the Oilers probably fall out. Koskinen, Smith, both have been good at times. They both look shaky at times. They've both been pulled out of games, not that in recent weeks. So there are some signs there that maybe the Oilers, the shine's kind of coming off. And yet, they're still 5th overall in the NHL. They've played more games than some teams behind them, but still being 5th overall in the NHL at this point, 8 games above 500. If they played 500 hockey from here, that's 90 points. Does that get into the playoffs in the West? It very well might. 90 points may be good enough in the West. Maybe good enough in the Atlantic as well. That's not a conversation for this video necessarily, but you'll notice that when we look at the divisions, it's Metro, Atlantic, Central, Metro, Pacific, Central, Pacific, Metro, Metro, Central. Not a lot of Atlantic in there beyond Boston. Colorado, 28 games, 18 wins, 8 losses, 2 extra points as in overtime and shootout losses. 7-3 record, they've won 5 in a row. So they're going to this game in Boston tonight looking for their 6th straight. They're number 1 in goals for per game. They're number 11 in goals against. Their power play's 13th and their penalty kill is 21st. So the special team's a little bit concerning, I guess. But that goals for is fantastic. They have 4 players with 10 or more goals. And keep in mind, Rantanen has 6 and Landeskog has 4. If they had played every game, odds are they have at least 10 goals each. Now, this is where you put up the asterisk. But if they played every game, Shannon, odds are somebody else who has 10 goals might have scored less because they may not have got prime ice time. Can't argue with that. That would absolutely be true. Good point, viewers. But Colorado, that offense is startling. It is scary. So you've got the number 1 offense, the number 4 offense for Boston up against each other tonight. And yet the number 1 goals against goes to Boston. Number 11 goals against goes to Colorado. So is that the difference maker? Colorado, once they are healthy and they're clicking, I could be... I could probably see them being number 1 overall. And I know there's quite the distance between themselves and number one overall right now, but the way they were playing early in the season before all the injuries took place, I really honestly think by the end of the year, this could be your President's Trophy winner in Colorado, which means they're not allowed to win the Stanley Cup. It's one of those rules. Those lines do not cross. Now, Arizona, 31 games played, 17-10-4 record. They're 5-3-2 in their last 10, and they've lost their last game. Now, Arizona fans, I understand, don't like me mentioning it, but they're 25th in goals for per game. They don't score enough. They really don't. Their goals against, they're second. So it really is a matter of defense, and goaltending. And their special teams, they're number 12 on the power play, which is better than last year, but they're number 15 on the penalty kill. And last year their penalty kill was fantastic. So with Arizona, it's kind of a situation where as long as their goaltending holds up, as long as their defense holds up, they stay in. But if I'm looking on a team out of this top 10 and saying I could see them falling a bit, Arizona's probably that team. Arizona, and Edmonton again because of the Draisaitl, McDavid, and then everybody else conversation we can have. Same conversation we can have with Boston. To be fair, same conversation we can have with Boston to some extent. Although, and again, we could look at player versus player, but I do look at Arizona and say they may end up being a team that struggles to maintain this record and this pace because they're 25th in goals for in the NHL. That's going to make it really difficult for them. There are going to be a lot of games that are 2-1, 1-0 that they have to win in order to make the playoffs and in order to maintain this position. Philadelphia, right now, and this game that they're playing, they're winning, but they're 16-8-5 as I record this through 29 games. They're 6-2-2 in their last 10. They lost their last game prior to this one against the Senators today. They're 13th in goals for. They're 6th in goals against. 6th in goals against kind of surprises me a little bit because you look at Hart and Elliott and you don't think, well, those guys are probably number 6 in goals against per game because we can remember Hart being pulled numerous times, Elliott having some shaky starts. The fact they're number 6 in goals against is fantastic for Philadelphia. Their power play is 17th and their penalty kill is 10th. They have 8 players with 6 or more goals. This is a team that scores by committee as well, much like the Islanders, much like St. Louis. Who do you shut down? And if somebody says, well, Claude Giroux. Well, Claude Giroux's not scoring point a game right now, so it's not all Claude Giroux. And while he may be their best player and their biggest star, they haven't really needed him to be that this year in order to get to this record, which means that if Claude Giroux from here on scores like we know he can, they may be even harder to beat. So Philadelphia, a team that this year I had making the playoffs only because they haven't missed the playoffs 2 years in a row in a very long time. Because I'm like, you know what? They'll find a way. So far, they have. Pittsburgh. I'm wearing Pittsburgh. Why am I wearing Pittsburgh? People are going to say he's wearing Pittsburgh because he's picking them as a team in the top 10 that can end up missing the playoffs. No. 29 games, 16 wins, 9 losses in regulation, and then those 4 extra loss points there. 6-2-2 overall. They've won their last 2 games. They're number 6 in goals for. They're number 7 in goals against. They're number 24 on the power play and number 13 on the penalty kill. Number 13 on the penalty kill makes sense. None of the rest of it does. Number 7 in goals against with Jarry and Murray. That's a surprise. And Jarry being the guy who's playing a lion's share of the games is also kind of a surprise. Number 6 in goals for is a large surprise. There's 8 players with 6 or more goals, so the same as Philly, but you got Sidney Crosby with 5 because he's been out with an injury. And the reality is, once Crosby comes back, their offense gets better. Galchenyuk has 2. He's been sniffing around the net a lot lately. He should at least score 20, you would think, in Pittsburgh. If he doesn't, Galchenyuk may have a shorter career than any of us had envisioned. This is bizarre. This is really bizarre. They go through as many injuries as Colorado, St. Louis. We got 3 teams in this top 10 here that have gone through massive amounts of injuries and are still top 10 teams in the league. I'm wearing Pittsburgh because I respect what they've done, and I think it's fantastic. I think it's amazing that they've fashioned the record they have considering the amount of injuries and the importance of the injuries as well. So sometimes you'll see where a fan base will say, oh, our team's really beat up, there's 8 injuries, and then you look and it's fourth line, third line guys, depth defensemen, so you can understand how that might affect things, but it's not the big star players. Pittsburgh is not the case. It's been the big names that have gotten hurt. So fantastic for them. And they, much like Colorado, could end up being a lot stronger when everybody's healthy. St. Louis, we already know what St. Louis is. They won the Cup in June, so we already know. Winnipeg, 29 games, 17-10-2. How are they doing it? They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. Their most recent game that they lost was that overtime loss on there against Dallas. They're 20th in goals for. So that completely destroys the narrative we had that they would have to outscore their problems this year. That narrative, you can crumple that up and throw it in a corner. They're number 8 in goals against. So that whole narrative about, oh, their defense, it sucks, it's no good. But Hellebuck has bailed them out night after night after night. So I'm not willing to say, oh, their defense is great. It's been good. And Spiza, waiver wire pickup of the year, that's been just fantastic for them. And Lucas Spiza can be that for short periods for 30, 40 games. He can do that. He can be a really steadying force. I always thought that the last year he played in Vancouver, he was actually pretty good. I didn't understand why everybody hated on him. 26th on the power play. So again, Winnipeg is not outscoring their problems. They really aren't. And they're 25th on the penalty kill. So special teams not their friend. The good news is Winnipeg doesn't take very many penalties, which may explain why their penalty kill isn't all that great, because they don't have to practice it all that much. They really don't experience it often in games. So their overall special teams numbers are concerning. Their goals for concerning. Because if Hellebuck falters at all, Winnipeg takes a drop. Winnipeg being in the Central, it is a tough division. You've got 3 in the top 10. So it is a tough division. You don't have Dallas on this board, and Minnesota has been charging as well. So it's easily something you can envision that Winnipeg could drop as low as 5th in the division by the end of the year if Minnesota stays hot and if Dallas remembers how to score goals, which sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. There are 3 players with 11 or more goals for Winnipeg, and Patrick Laine is not one of them. He's leading the team in scoring with 8 goals, 20 assists, 28 points in 27 games. If Laine gets hot as a goal scorer, that goals for is better than 20th, and the power play would likely get better as well with Laine throwing some power play goals in the net. It may be related that Laine's only got 8 goals, and their power play sits 26th in the National Hockey League. So if I had to say which one do I think would probably drop off, for me it's a toss-up between the Jets and a team that used to be the Jets back in the 90s in the Arizona Coyotes. But all of these teams are playing well. And all of these teams have really good records. And it's been a fantastic start to the season for teams that missed the playoffs in Philly, Arizona, and Edmonton. And teams that were favored to miss the playoffs in Philly. Many favored them to miss the playoffs this year. Edmonton, everybody had them missing the playoffs for the most part. And Winnipeg, who it was believed were going to take a major drop this year, and they really haven't. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. Now I got to go back to watching a hockey game. I will talk to you again soon.